Welcome to the Equine Vet Connect podcast. I'm your host, Dan Carter. I'm a veterinarian and a farrier. The goal of this podcast is to educate horse people, break things down, bust myths, and keep it real. Speaking of breaking things down, here's my legal disclaimer to keep my attorney and insurance company happy. While I am a vet, I may not be your vet. Contact them before trying anything you hear on this podcast. Remember, just because you watched it on YouTube or heard it on a podcast does not mean you can do it. Please use common sense. All right, welcome back to the Equine Vet Connect podcast. I'm Dan Carter. Got Dr. Caroline Brown with me. We're here in the studio, treatment room 1. Interesting fact, a lot of people, have asked like when we have time to actually do these. We do them in the mornings. We're morning people around here for the most part. We've tried doing the afternoons, and we're kind of tired, but we're all about mornings, which is why we kind of run on Dunkin'. I was like when Dr. Brown's on with me, she stops by the Dunkin' and gets coffee. Now, I'm a straight black coffee guy. Actually this morning I went with a plain cappuccino.
That you downed in about less than 10 minutes. In the time that it took for me to drop it off here, go to the printer, print my notes out, your coffee was gone. I was kind of impressed. I was like, man, he's caffeinated today.
I do everything like 110%. Only got one speed, and that's wide open. So, what about you? Like, this is a
cold brew with vanilla cold foam, extra shot of espresso, 2 pumps of vanilla. Yeah. Wow.
I'm usually like, may I have it hot black, please.
We went for the extra large today because it's been that kind of week. So.
It kind of rolls right in. Like we're going to be talking about foaling today, which I think foaling, step one as a veterinarian during foaling and breeding season is caffeination, because we're not sleeping. And
no.
If you've got a foal on the way,
you're not sleeping either.
Neither are you. So. Husbands, if your wife's horse is having a baby, just keep them caffeinated. You're going to be happier.
Yes.
So,
everybody will be a little happier. So.
Yes. And when the vet shows up at your barn, when you're foaling out this mare, just go ahead and bring some coffee.
Oh, you'll be my favorite client.
Yes, I'm telling you.
Oh, yeah.
I used to love when I'd roll up some of those barns in Kentucky, and we're foaling one out, and it'd be like 3:30 in the morning. Like, hey doc, here's some coffee. Greatest people ever. Well, let's get into it. We're gonna deliver some foals today. So in our last repro episode, we talked about everything it takes to get your mare bred, get you through that first, second, third trimester, and now it's time.
We're here.
Yeah, we're here.
We're here. So yeah, last episode we kind of talked about, those signs kind of leading up to them. So, watching that bag develop, mare kind of getting a little more restless with things. And I think something that's really important to remember that I think a lot of people maybe don't know is like how much development happens in the last 24 hours before the foal is born. And so, in a lot of other species, including humans, we can, induce labor once we think it's ready. In horses, we really can't do that.
True.
We're kind of waiting on their clock because there's just this big spike in cortisol that happens right before the foal comes out that leads to all of the development in the lungs and the bones and just kind of what prepares them for the outside world.
Right.
And so, I've had people ask me, well, can I try to plan my mare's due date around a certain day? Like, I'm trying to go out of town, I'm trying to do this. And I'm like, no, ma'am, we can't really do that. That's not really an option.
No, it's not like a year at 37 weeks and we can schedule this.
Yeah, right. It's, these foals kind of have their time that they're like, I'm done cooking at this day, and that's the day I want to come out. And it's probably going to be a day that's not convenient for anybody.
Usually the day and the time, neither one of those is convenient.
No. It's always late at night. It's, I think midnight is kind of that sweet spot. Like, they like to go kind of like between that like 11 to like 1 a.m. is like where everything happens. And they like it to be nice and quiet. So, if there's a lot of commotion going on in the barn, they're probably not going to do it in the middle of the day. I've had some try to do it in the middle of the day, which is kind of weird, but teach their own, I guess.
I think Oh, I think I've delivered one foal during daylight hours. Now, granted, I don't do near as many as you do.
No.
But I've had one during daylight hours. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
Which is strange.
But when we think about the actual labor, we kind of divide it up into 3 stages.
Right.
So the stage 1 is this, this kind of pre-delivery stage where, the foal is kind of getting into position in the birth canal. And what it looks like is your mare is just really uncomfortable. I've had a lot of people kind of say, hey, she kind of looks like she's colicking. She's restless. She might be up and down. She might be, kind of nesting a little bit, like making herself like a little spot that she's trying to go in. And as this is happening, like, you really want to make sure that if you do catch this, you're ready to go. That, if your mare's outside, but you want her to foal in the stall, get her back in the stall, have your cameras up, have your little foaling kit ready so that if, you do need to jump in and take action, you're ready to go. So, and you might get faked out. I've had a lot of times too where I've been watching these mares and I'm like watching them on the cameras. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then nothing happens. So
I think the camera's the greatest thing in the world because if a mare's starting to go into labor, if you barely crack that door, she'll stop.
She's like,
just freezes. Like, I'm done.
She'll suck it back in.
And having those cameras where you can sit back and watch at a distance, it does. I think it makes a big difference.
Yes.
So, because if your mare is foaling, like, just watch.
Yeah.
We got a little bit of time here, not a lot, but like give her some time. They're good at this.
Yeah, they're good at this.
This is the one thing horses are really good at.
Yes. The one thing they're good at.
I'm just saying, usually left to their own devices, they make a lot of bad decisions. But foaling, they usually do it pretty quick. Like, what are we looking at timeline? We need to have this out in, 20 minutes?
Yeah. So that first kind of stage can last a couple of hours. It's, they say about 1 to 2. Sometimes these mares are like, no, I'm ready to go right now. But yeah, once that kind of stage 1 ends when you see that amnion coming out, which is, we call it the white bag.
Right.
So it looks like kind of a big, egg amnion thing that's coming out. So that's the water breaking essentially is. So when that happens, you enter stage 2, and stage 2 that's the fast stage. Yep. So that's the actual foal coming out, and that should max 30 minutes. I've had some that are less than 5.
Yes.
I can tell you when I did my internship, I lived in a house that was exactly 4 minutes from the clinic. And most of the time, sitting on the camera watching these horses go, and so I'm kind of seeing things happening, and I get a little alert when, once they're dilated enough and the amnion's coming out and I can see it, and I'm usually sleeping in my scrubs or something, so all I gotta do is put my shoes on and drive, and a lot of times I would miss the birth. By the time I'd get there, the foal's already out.
I can tell you, one of the breeding farms I consult for, they live maybe 50 yards from the barn. The foal alert goes off, they get up. By the time they're in New York or Pennsylvania, around the New York line. Get up, and by the time they put on their winter clothes and get to the barn, this is typically over. Yeah. And it's a 50-yard walk.
It's fast.
It happens. It should be fast.
Yes. Even I know people that they've been on foal watch and they're kind of sitting in front of the stall watching, the mare's kind of staring at them. They get up, go to the bathroom, go do some chores, they come back and the foal's halfway out. Right. They're like, seriously?
And I'll tell you, this is one time where if you do all your preparation right, this is a very quick, simple process. Yes. Especially from a nutrition standpoint. I think we forget about the nutrition that's involved in actually expelling the foal. Yes. The uterus is a giant muscle. It's got to squeeze and push this out. And that doesn't exercise but about once a year if you're a brood mare. And that's when you're actually expelling this foal. But one of the things that I really preach, and we've talked about a little bit, is that nutrition in these mares and having that really good balance of calcium and carbohydrates late-term pregnancy. Yes. Having those reserves of carbohydrates, having that reserve of calcium ready to go, because that's what muscle runs on. When actually muscle functions, it's function on carbohydrates and it's function on calcium. Those are the 2 biggest things it needs. So making sure your mare's in a good nutritional state prior to foaling is great for getting these foals out. Because if that uterus runs out of nutrition halfway through this process, that's when they stop. Yeah, that's where things get complicated. And this is one of those that, if you really think about it, we're preparing for this moment for essentially a year.
Yes.
We're preparing, like, that's when we start checking these mares. That's when we're getting them ready to be bred. We breed them. We're taking care of them for 11 months a lot of times to get to this single 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But doing all those things right leading up to this makes this stage 2 parturition pretty seamless for the most part.
Yes. And, we'd always, at least at my internship, we'd throw them a big old flake of alfalfa once they're done. Once that foal's out, here's your food.
Yes.
Because they got to start rebuilding that energy.
We keep them fed. Like I said, we'll really bump up. And these mares aren't eating a ton at each meal, but we're going to, usually I tell people, focus on making sure there's good carbohydrates, a good form of calcium in that feed. That's where the alfalfa hay comes in. Great form of calcium in there. Making sure they're ready. Mm-hmm. This is a question I get asked a lot. When do I need to get involved?
Good question. So, like we said, this process should be max 30 minutes long. And so, if you are watching, whether it's on a camera or in front of the stall, and you see it happen, start setting a timer. So, get your little phone out, set your timer going, and start tracking that progress. So, the foal should come out in kind of a staggered position. So, we want them to come front legs first, then the head and neck. And then once they get those shoulders past, they pretty much fall out at that point. But they're going to come in a little bit of a staggered position. So one front foot is going to be a little bit in front of the other. And so that's how these shoulders are able to kind of get through the birth canal. And so as you're watching these feet come out, you'll see the mare physically contracting to try to push that out. So you should see some progress, just a little bit at a time. You'll maybe see one foot first and then the next foot, and they kind of start coming out like this. If you're watching the video, you can see me just kind of inching forward. So
it's like a little dance here.
If you're listening, just imagine in your head. Exactly. And so you should be seeing a little bit of progress at a time. If your mare is actively contracting and you haven't seen any movement or progression in about 10 to 15 minutes, that's where you need to contact your vet and say, hey, something's going on. And they can help advise you. So one of the things that, it's a controversial topic, but it's getting involved yourself in there. So I know, the way I was taught and my kind of philosophy is if your mare's doing her thing, if she's, pushing and this foal is coming out, let her do her thing.
Yes.
But if you're watching and you're like, okay, the feet are not staggered as they're coming out, if you're seeing body parts that don't look like they're supposed to be there, get a pair of gloves, stick your hand in there, see what's going on. That's sometimes if they are coming out in a little bit of a wonky position, like their shoulders are straight and they're coming out, kind of diving first, that could be something where we need to just very carefully kind of manipulate them to kind of push. If they're coming out, with their neck kind of flexed to the side, that could be something where we need to just kind of gently manipulate them to kind of push back and get re-straightened out. If they're coming all cockamamie, if they're sideways or backwards, that's a whole nother situation that we really need to say, hey, let's reevaluate, and we definitely need to get a vet out here because we need to do some major work. And sometimes it is something we can easily manipulate, but, if you start describing something and it sounds like we're in the wrong position, we may say, hey, we need to get this mare to a C-section.
Right. And I think that's really important. And when it comes to checking these mares, like I said, we get that 10-minute mark and we're not progressing, we should contact your vet.
Yes.
Talk to them. A lot of people say, well, can I just grab the legs and pull? And it's like, well, there's a lot more that goes into that.
Yes.
You need to know if you're dealing with front legs or hind legs. You need to know if the head's back or the head's forward, because I've definitely had that where I got two legs out and the head to the side. Now we got to reposition this foal.
Right.
That's not the easiest feat in the
No,
world,
it's not.
because that uterus is doing all it can to push this foal out, and you've got to reposition.
Yes.
So.
And it's a lot harder than you think. You're working with a lot of stuff. Your mare's sitting there exerting a lot of energy trying to push, and now you're back there finagling. So it can be a lot. There can be this is a really kind of dire moment. So that's why it's really important to have a relationship with your veterinarian, and keep your vet in check and say, hey, she's starting to show these signs. I think she's going to be going into labor soon, so that we're on standby and we're ready to go. That if we do need to get involved, we've got a plan in place.
And if you've got a trailer, have your truck and trailer ready to go. This isn't the time. Like, you want to make sure the tires are inflated. You know, if you don't drive your trailer a lot, you know,
Yes.
I've had that where we start getting into a foaling emergency and it's like, hey, we got to get this mare to the hospital. And that's when people realize, hey, the tires aren't pumping on the trailer, the running lights aren't working. You know, let's have all that stuff ready to go because it's crunch time.
Yes. Yes.
So,
absolutely.
Other things you watch for are that I tell people to pay attention to. You talked about, you get this white bag that comes out.
Oh, the red bag.
The red bag.
The red bag. Yes.
So that's something we'd live with in this part area of Georgia because there is a lot of fescue. Fescue is a great grass. Just not a great grass for mares.
No,
Late-term pregnancies. So let's talk about red bags a little
Yes. So the red bag is basically what has happened is the placenta has prematurely detached from the lining of the uterus. And it's coming out first. And it's basically covering the foal's face as it's coming out.
Thick.
It's very thick. It's not easy for the foal to break through like the amnion. The amnion's basically like egg whites. It's just, it's easy for them to kind of puncture through. The placenta, they can't do that.
Right.
And so as it's coming out like that, you'll just see this big red blob coming out through the mare's vulva. That is an emergency.
Yes.
And that's why in one of the foaling kits, you need to have some sort of sharp object, you know, a pocket knife, scissors, a scalpel blade, whatever you've got, because if you see that, you're going to want to take that, slice it open.
You've got to get that open. You can't. This is one time I tell people, like, if I get the phone call, like, hey, there's this red thing coming out, you don't get to wait for me to get there.
No, I said cut it right now.
Yeah, you need to get involved.
Because by the time that I get there, it may be too late at that point. Because as that foal's coming out, it can't breathe.
Yeah, because what we're talking about is the placenta attaches to the wall of the uterus. That is basically providing the nutrients, including oxygen, to this foal until they can breathe on their own.
Yes.
And if that becomes detached, they no longer have that oxygen supply coming from the dam. We've got to get that open so they can breathe. This is mission critical stuff.
This is like major emergency, and so once this happens too, we're going to be watching that foal like a hawk for its first couple of days, because there is a risk of them not getting oxygen and getting into a situation called a dummy foal, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this episode. But that is one of the things that I say you need to get involved right now. You need to be ready to go. Like this is your time to take action. So.
And that's, I think you said it best. This is why it's really important to have that relationship with your veterinarian.
Yes.
Because when these things start happening, you can pick up the phone and call, because unless your vet lives right down the street, it's going to be a minute before we can get there. So having that relationship where you can start talking to them, make sure you ask a lot of these questions beforehand, so that you are prepared. You are prepared.
Right. And we mentioned the fescue thing just because there is a much increased incidence of this happening for mares that are on fescue, but it's not the only thing. We've had some mares that have, A+ diet and management, and it can still happen. And we don't always know why it happens, but you just got to be prepared for it when it does.
So now the fun part, foal's out.
Foal's out. So
everybody can sit back and breathe for a minute. And then we're in the next stage.
Yes. So this, now you've got this foal out. There's going to be, stage 3. So that's what we call kind of our placenta delivery and the foal kind of doing its thing. So once the foal is out, you'll see the umbilical cord usually tracking back up into the mare's uterus. I was taught personally, you don't want to manually cut that. It should detach on its own, either through just gravity doing its thing. Sometimes the mare will kind of step on it, or the foal's kind of thrashing around and it just kind of breaks on its own. But you don't really want to go in there and start messing with it, because there's a big vessel going through there. And
when it's very important to get all of this.
Yes.
And that placenta will not leave the uterus until it detaches.
Yes.
And I can tell you, one little piece of placenta that's left behind can lead to can lead to infection and can lead to laminitis like you've never seen before. It's to me, it's right up there with the type of laminitis we see with Potomac horse fever.
Yes.
Like it is
severe.
Severe.
Very severe. And again, it's just the tiniest piece. And these signs can start within, even like 24 hours after the birth. Like, if you know anything about cows can live with a retained placenta for like days.
Oh, yeah.
Weeks sometimes.
Cows will make it.
Yeah, but horses, no. That's one of these things that so our kind of rule of thumb is you want this placenta out within 3 hours of the birth. And a lot of times it happens pretty quickly. Because after your mare's delivered the foal, her uterus is still contracting. She's still going, and she's pushing this placenta out. And it usually, once it does fall out, a lot of times it gets trampled. Do your best to go in there and grab it, because that is something that at least I really like to evaluate.
I'm going to look.
Yeah, I love looking at it. Placenta's my favorite organ.
Really?
I love the placenta. I think it's the coolest thing. But it's nice for us to look at. It's going to give us an idea and say, what was the health like with this pregnancy? If there is anything in the placenta that looks like there was some placentitis during the pregnancy, we may be watching the foal, taking a little more blood work, potentially giving it some antibiotics. If we're looking at it and it's not complete, we may say, hey, we need to go find this piece of placenta, do some uterine lavages to try to just get all of that out. So it's very important. Placenta can go missing sometimes if your mare falls out in the field. It will get eaten by dogs and birds and all the things. So, if your mare foaled overnight in the field, try your best to look for it.
Because that's one of the first questions, or one of the first things I tell people is make sure we keep that placenta.
Keep the placenta.
We're going to stretch this out. We're going to look at it because I want to make sure it is all there. Because like I said, a tiny piece that is retained can set off an infection in that uterus that can cause laminitis that is just unreal. And as a person spent most of my career in laminitis, prevention is everything to me. Preventing laminitis is everything. So if we see that, if we can start that supportive care to prevent that infection and prevent the laminitis, we're better all the way around.
Right.
So strongly
recommend.
Try to get that placenta. And it's real simple. Just put it in a bucket. We'll look at it when we get there.
Put it in a bucket, put it in a garbage bag, do something with it, and
hang on to it.
It's, a very, very important organ.
Yes.
Yep. So placenta's coming out, and now we've got our foal. So, typically what goes on is, there's a lot of hormones going on through your mare right now. So, and she's pretty tired herself, but what you should see is that she's showing some interest in her foal. She's looking at it. She'll usually start trying to lick it dry. I always tell people, have some towels nearby just in case, because most of these foals are getting born, in kind of the dead of winter. And
they love the coldest night of the year.
They'll pick a really cold, rainy, snowy night, like very inconvenient. So, the mares are usually in there. They're trying to lick their foals dry, but it's good to have some towels in there just to, try to help them out, because they're not doing the 100% job in there. But these mares should at least be kind of showing some interest in them. They're talking to them, they're licking them. The foal should be at least doing some movements. You don't want to see these foals just kind of laying there like a fish. They're usually looking around, and they'll start trying to make some attempts to stand within the first 10 to 15 minutes for a lot of them. And so our kind of rule of thumb, we call it the 1, 2, 3 rule. So you want to see these foals standing within 1 hour, nursing within 2 hours, and then, placenta coming out within 3. I also say that they should be at least trying to pass their meconium, which is their first feces, kind of within that first 3 hours as well. A lot of times the placenta has completely come out before the foal's even stood. That's fine. So if you go a little out of order, but that standing at 1 hour is really, really crucial for these guys. Or at least have made a really, really good attempt to stand.
Yes.
Some are a little slower. Some of our warm blood friends are a little slow when it comes to things.
Well, they got these legs for days, and they're trying to figure out how to get everything coordinated. And
Friesians can be a little slow.
Thoroughbreds are, some of them, their legs are so long that I swear, it just takes them forever to stand. It's almost like you're on stilts trying to stand up. That's what I feel like.
Yes. The best ones in my experience are the red quarter horse fillies. Are the fastest. I've timed it. I'm like,
they're up quick.
They're up quick. They're I've seen them in under 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay, show off.
And this is another time where I tell people, like, don't rush right in.
No.
If this foal hits the ground, give mama a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just kind of stand back. You don't want her, because the mare's going to almost go into a protection mode, even though she knows you. She did this in the middle of the night because she didn't want somebody around.
Yeah.
And so if that foal's out, again, if you got cameras, just keep watching the cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rush in. Just keep watching those cameras.
Mares are very, very good mothers. They have a very good maternal instinct. So, even maiden mares, I've seen, like, just something switches in their brain. And, the nicest mare, like, you could have had this mare for years and you guys are best buds, but that foal hits the ground and just something changes.
This mama bear.
Yeah, and these mares can get very aggressive. They can get very protective of their foals. So, keep yourself safe. A lot of times I do like to keep a halter on the mare just so you have something to kind of grab onto in case you need to. But, she's going to do everything she can to protect that foal. So, if you are getting involved, go really slow. Do not get in between her and the foal. Have an extra set of hands too, especially if you are doing anything with the foal. Have somebody holding the mare, because they'll bite the crap out of you.
They will.
They'll bite the crap out of you.
And like we said, just give them a chance. Let that mare and foal bond.
Yes.
Mama you'll see her kind of nuzzle on that foal. She'll try to encourage that foal to stand. She wants to get it up. She's trying to point it in the right direction.
Yeah.
So it figures out how to nurse. And to me, that's one of the things, like, you talk about your 1, 2, 3, that nursing within 2 hours, that's really important.
Very important. So when your foal comes out, their immune system is basically non-existent. We talked about in the last episode, doing vaccines and, making sure we're deworming to try to at least set their immune system up for the right things. And that first drink of colostrum is going to be where everything kind of, gets set in place. So foals, as they're, in their first couple days of life, they're taking lots of kind of little drinks throughout the day. You might see them nursing up to 20 times an hour or something. But that first initial drink is where all of those immunoglobulins and antibodies and everything is coming into play. And that's what's setting up their immune system.
This is a one-shot deal.
Yes.
You got one shot to get this right.
Correct.
The GI tract in the foal has to have very large openings to allow these immunoglobulins to pass through. The mare has to have them in their milk. You've got, I think, was it 12 hours before that GI tract closes?
It starts to close, yeah. So 24 hours and it's almost completely closed.
Right.
So, one of the things when we do our first veterinary exam, we try to come out kind of within that first 12 to 24 hours that the foal has been born, and we'll do an immunoglobulin test or an IgG test. And this is where we'll take a little blood sample, and within 7 minutes of taking the blood sample, we will know right then and there if your foal got its colostrum. Ideally, again, within this first 2 hours, that's where we need to start doing things, because these foals are born into manure and just all the bacteria in the world, and so they need some help trying to get that.
And they do not have an immune system
until
they get that colostrum. That colostrum is what keeps them protected from disease.
Right. And so if we do this first veterinary check and we see that, that their immunoglobulins aren't where they need to be, we'll start taking some intervention. We'll end up running them some plasma. And this plasma is something that, at least we keep in supply.
Right.
I know a lot of vets do, especially if they know that there's a lot of foaling in their area, and we will administer it to them to try to, jumpstart their immune system for them. And it's something that, we can usually do right there on the farm, and, we'll still watch them really closely. A lot of them I will start on antibiotics as well, just as a precaution. But that's why it's really important that when you have a foal, you call your vet, usually that next morning, and say, hey, I need you to come out here today so that we can do this. Because, if you get to over 24 hours and that foal hasn't had any sort of immune support, that's where we start to see, them decline really quickly. We call it failure of passive transfer,
right.
And it is devastating. These foals are very, very sick. We're usually trying to play catch up And, it's a pretty grave prognosis, like, when we get to them.
Well, and I think a lot of people will see these foals and they think, oh, I don't really need to call because they're up, they're moving, they're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
They will for about 48 to 72 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they have a failure passive transfer, that first 48 to 72, they're lively, they're doing great, and then you will see them just tank. I mean, they go from up and alert to napping all the time. They're sick, and you're really behind the 8 ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can catch them, that first vet exam, that in between that 12 to 24 hours, and my the rule is 800 or greater on IgG. I want to peg 800. I don't want to be looking at this IgG and be like, well, we're close. I always say 799 is not 800.
That's not 800, no.
So we want to hit a heavy 800 on that test. And we want to make sure we're there because one bag of plasma can be the difference between a live foal and a dead foal.
Yes, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Foals that get sick really early in life, it is a real struggle on them. And they've actually shown in racing where foals that get sick within the first few weeks of life, their performance is greatly limited.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, and it's not just performance we're talking about, but it's just, these foals struggle in life to really thrive.
To do anything, really. They're very unthrifty. So, yeah, it is essential that we get there within these first couple hours. And
I've had some farms over the year, they're like, look, you can test it, but I'm still running plasma too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
But if they're pegging that 800, and I get this question a lot. People are always asking, well, can I just use, I don't want to pay for the plasma, can I use a goat colostrum? Mm-hmm. And my answer is always no.
No.
And can I use a powder colostrum?
No.
You need.
Yes.
You need plasma.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a failure passive transfer, you need hyperimmune plasma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, and we can kind of talk more a little too about those first couple days and that first vet exam and, the other things we're looking for. So, when we come out, yes, I'd say one of the major things we're looking at is that immunity, because that's going to be kind of our setup of what are we going to do for the next couple days.
Right.
But we're also going to do, a really good physical exam and say, look for any anatomic abnormalities. So, a hernia is a really good example.
Yes.
So abdominal hernias are kind of common in a lot of horses, and a lot of them are pretty tiny and they'll just kind of resolve over time, but a lot of them we will say, hey, we kind of need to watch this and potentially get involved if we need to correct it manually. Mm-hmm. We'll look for cleft palates.
Yes.
That's another abnormality, and that's something that, if we do find it early, we'll want to get involved because that can lead to some pretty serious aspiration pneumonias. Mm-hmm. We'll listen to their lungs. We'll, make sure that they have passed their meconium. If they haven't, there's some enemas and other procedures we can kind of do to get involved. Urination is also really important in these guys. Colts are more likely to rupture their bladder as they're coming out. So if it looks like they're kind of starting to build up some fluid in their belly or they're kind of straining to urinate, that's definitely something that we'll look at as well. Mm-hmm. We'll check their umbilicus, which is the connection to where it was going to the placenta. Something that, you're going to have to do during your, first couple days with your foal is disinfecting that umbilicus because it is still open into their body.
Yes.
And so, it should be dry. It should kind of start to shrivel up a little bit. And something I like to do, at least for the first kind of 48 hours of their life, is dip it in either some diluted chlorohex or some iodine, just to kind of keep it clean and disinfected until it closes up. So
I agree 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And watch too, big thing, we don't see it a ton here, but I've seen it in some of the farms I consult for is, there's a condition called white muscle disease. And this is where it's a vitamin E and some plus minus a selenium deficiency. It can be both or either one. And what happens is their swallow reflex, they almost become dysphagic. They're unable to swallow very easily. What you'll notice on that is every time they nurse, you have milk coming out the nose because they're not swallowing. You need to let your vet know if that's occurring. Simple fix for that is late-term pregnancy, bump the vitamin E, start really supplementing vitamin E. I tell, if you've ever been in here and talked to me about muscle, that's where we see a lot of it. I always say I can nerd all day on vitamin E, but it really boils down to Nano E or Elevate E. Those are the two products you want to use. You can start supplementing those mares late-term pregnancy, help keep those vitamin E levels up, prevent that white muscle. Don't see it a ton here, but in areas that have snow on the ground year-round, or not year-round, what it feels like year-round, up in the north, you can be limited on that vitamin E. So vitamin E supplementation, trying to prevent that white muscle.
And there's so many diseases, too, down the line that have been linked back to, mares that in utero, they weren't getting enough, and that affected their foal.
Yeah, we'll do a whole episode.
That's a whole, that's a rabbit hole.
That's when I really start nerding, because I spent 10 years looking at vitamin E in horses, and we'll get on that subject a whole nother day. We're not opening that can today, so
we'll be here all day if we open that can of worms.
Yes. So, and I think that kind of leads into the importance of nutrition. Like, this is when this foal's on the ground, and these mares are lactating. This is actually the highest energy demands of a mare. You physically cannot feed them enough calories to support themselves and support milk. Milk is a big strain. Like, producing milk is a big strain from a nutrition standpoint. And this is why, if you go back to the other episode, we talked about pushing these mares up to a higher body condition score of like 7, even sometimes pushing an 8, because they're going to drop 1 to 2 body condition scores in that first 60 days. So especially if you're going to rebreed, you got to have some savings in the bank.
I've seen a lot of these brood mares. By the time we get to weaning, they are looking rough. They are like,
because the highest demands is in that first 60 to 65 days of lactation. And like I said, you physically cannot feed these mares enough. Their stomach can't hold it. So we really focus on energy dense feeds, alfalfas, carbohydrates. I cannot preach carbohydrates. In this day and age, where we talk a lot about metabolic disease and a lot about insulin resistance, we got to think in these brood mares, this is not the time. Like, we don't want to overfeed, but at the same time, this is where we want to start thinking about carbohydrates and increasing carbohydrates in the diet. More energy dense feeds from a carbohydrate standpoint, making sure there's adequate amount of protein in the diet. Because like I said, the energy demands, like you just burned a lot of calories making a foal. Now you're producing the food for this foal. You're producing milk. And your mares still got to live and thrive. So this is some nutrient, you need some nutrient dense feed here.
Absolutely. And that's what's, good about a lot of those mare foal feeds is it packs a lot of calories into kind of a smaller package. So, because a lot of them, they don't want to sit there and eat pounds and pounds and pounds of feed. And there's just not a lot of room in there left, especially as that foal is growing in that late stage. So, getting these really dense feeds in there is good.
Small meals multiple times a day. When they're nursing, same thing, small meals multiple times a day. Letting them have that free choice, high quality hay or grass is really important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about, all right, everything's good, everything checks out, that new foal exam, first 12 to 24 hours. Let's kind of talk about, let's just say like that first month. What do we expect to see during that first month? What are the things that we're looking for?
Right. So one of the things that we will, check to is, looking at the horse, the new foal itself, and, does it look like it was potentially premature? Was it dismature? Is there anything going on in the legs itself? Because there's been a lot of studies that show that turnout is really important for normal development in these foals. Extremely important in this. But if we have some anatomic things that we need to correct, we may hold off on that at first. So that's a little more your realm of expertise.
That's my favorite part of foals.
That's the legs, the crooked legs, and making them not crooked anymore, and all that. But getting these guys turned out and moving around is going to be super important for them. And your mare, especially if she is a maiden, she's going to be on a little more high alert. So you don't want to throw her out with an entire herd of horses. we may just want to keep them by themselves for the first couple days so that the foal can, move around and figure it out, and she's not, on hyper alert trying to guard it from everybody. Sometimes turning them out with other mares and foals can be helpful as well. It gives the foals, some interactions and, kind of gives them somebody to play with and, kind of move around with. You really want to avoid putting them out with stallions. You really want to avoid putting them out with horses that they're not familiar with already. So just, again, kind of setting your mare up with connections ahead of time. So if she's got some pasture mates that, she's comfortable with and, she can kind of trust around them, do that. So.
Well, and there's two big things we look at, or I look at on these young foals, and that's laxity versus contracture.
Yes.
Laxity, as soon as they get out and move around, everything tightens back up. One of the few times I will actually confine a foal is if I'm dealing with a severe contracture. We've got to keep those. It's the old adage: if you don't use it, you lose it. I need them to not use it because I need them to lose it. If they're really tight, really stiff, we start thinking about bandaging these legs. And we may keep those foals up either in a stall, small paddock. But that's also where you really need to talk to your veterinarian.
Yes.
And that's where I'd probably say the most critical exam in your horse's entire life is that one in the first 12 to 24. That's where we're going to set the stage.
Right.
Do we need to recheck it in a week? Do we recheck it in 2 days? Or like, hey, we're good, call me if. That is really, really important.
Because we can make a lot of difference in those first 12 to 24 hours when it comes to those. But then as time starts to go on and, things are developing now, if we haven't really done anything for that contracture, we can get really screwed down the line. And then we're dealing with some pretty severe abnormalities down the road that, we may never be able to recover from.
Well, I always tell people, I do a lot of the surgeries for these angular limbs and some of these contractures. I do a lot of surgeries for that. But my whole goal is, how do I avoid that? Can I avoid having to do surgery on this foal?
Right.
And a lot of times, if we can get them earlier, we can prevent having to do that surgery for either angular limbs, contractures.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about a lot of those in a different episode, because just angular limb deformities is an episode unto itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Contractures can be an episode unto itself. I mean, it is.
I started writing that in the episode, and I'm like, we can't do that in one episode.
No.
I was like, we're going to be here.
It's a lot.
It's going to be an hour-long episode.
But setting all that up, and like I said, that first exam, kind of getting things laid in place, and what we do during that first, a lot of times what we do in that first 1 to 3 months really kind of sets the course for development down the road.
And checking the mare, too, is equally as important. So we can't forget about mama. So.
Well, and one thing we didn't talk about, but if you see your foal just constantly at the bag, and it is just constantly there and never quits nursing, that's not normal.
That's not normal.
That's a lot of times that is agalactia. So one of the things that we're going to check after the foal's born, when we do that new foal check, we're going to check mom to make sure she is producing milk. And that's another thing we see in this area with fescue. And it's not just fescue, but fescue does increase your risk of an agalactia or lack of milk production. And so that's one thing I tell people to watch for. If it seems like the foal is just constantly trying to nurse, never lays down, it's just constantly at this bag, it is banging on this bag with its head, you need to be a little concerned, because mom may not be producing milk. It's trying to get milk, but the bag's empty.
But if there's nothing there, and there are some things that we can do to intervene to try to, jumpstart that milk production.
Right.
But again, that's something that we need to figure that out within that first, 12 to 24 hours, because if we don't get involved, now we're running into failure of passive transfer, foal's not getting its proper nutrition, and, if these foals glucose tanks fast, that can kind of send everything else into a spiral. So that is something that we need to, kind of chop on.
And I mean, there's all kind of supplements, there's powdered milks and things you can mix up, but nothing is as good as what mama makes.
Exactly.
So we want to catch that early, get mom producing. We've got some medications we can, talk to your vet, but they've got medications we can do to get them milking.
Right.
And that's really, really critical. So
absolutely.
That's a great point. We talk a lot about baby, but
mom's important.
Mom's important.
Yeah. I like to check, her hind end too, check the birth canal. Sometimes as these babies are coming out, they'll, tear her up, or, they'll punch a hole through her through her vagina and or rectum, and that could be something that surgically we need to go back in and correct, especially if this is a brood mare and we're trying to get her rebred. We want her to continue to produce foals. So if we leave that for too long and we don't know it's there, that could become a risk for infection. That could just be something anatomically that we have a harder time correcting later on. So it's something that's just as important. We don't want to forget about mom. So
we definitely don't. And sometimes mom needs a little pain control.
Yes, absolutely. She just pushed out a 100-pound foal. So.
Yes, sometimes she needs a little pain control. So we're going to kind of evaluate that too.
And the one kind of big thing too that that you really need to watch for is these mares can colic on you after birth.
Yes.
We've basically, what happens is our uterus was very large and now it's not, because we've pushed this baby out. We have this massive empty space in our abdomen, and so our colon just has all this room to start twisting and moving around and displacing, and these colics are very painful. They are very traumatic. So if your mare is recently foaled and she is very, very painful, that is an absolute emergency.
Yes.
They're at the highest risk of it kind of within that first, kind of couple hours after foaling, and it does start to go down as things start to calm down and the gut moves back into its normal place. But that is something you need to be very, very aware of.
Yeah, colic in that first, really up into that first 3 to 4 months, a lot of times is that large colon torsion.
Yes.
And I can tell you, I have seen, working in Kentucky, I saw a number of these. And you think you've seen what we call a flopping colic, which means a horse that cannot stay up no matter what. You haven't seen one until you see a large colon torsion.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you give these horses. They are so violently painful.
I mean, we had a 20-yard walk from where the vans came in to get into where we did surgery. And some of these mares would go down 3 times on the way there.
Yeah.
They couldn't make a 20-yard walk.
I've seen one, and it was traumatic. I mean, it was scary to see. Like, even as a vet, I'm like, I've seen some stuff, but I was like, oh, that is.
Yeah, this is, your mare starts acting colic, you get your vet out right away.
Right now, yeah.
And like I said, they may look at you and be like, hey, hook the trailer, this one needs surgery now. But, well, I think it was a great episode.
Yeah.
I'm reminded a lot of times when we do these episodes how much more there is to cover.
Yes.
Because we just kind of scratched the surface on that first month of life, and we'll do some more episodes in the future. But hopefully that answers a lot of questions y'all have. If you do have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us. I cannot encourage this enough. If you're going to be breeding, if you're going to have a foal, talk to your veterinarian.
Yes.
This is your person.
Yes.
I cannot encourage that enough. So if y'all got any questions or any ideas for some episodes, reach out to us. You can DM us. You can call us on the phone, send us an email, mail a letter. Carrier pigeons. We actually, I say carrier pigeon half jokingly, but we've had a couple racing pigeons that have stopped off the clinic for a few days before.
We did.
Yeah, I think I can remember 2 or 3 over the years. So,
yeah.
And they kind of stop off, hang out with us, and then move on their way.
Yeah, and then they move on, and we never. I don't know. I'm like, oh, well, hope you're having a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had one for a couple months actually.
We actually did.
Lived in the old barn. So.
Yes, we did. So
old Bruce.
Yes, if you got a carrier pigeon, send them by because they hang out here sometimes. So that's one way to get a hold of us. But, give us a call. Look forward to talking to y'all again. Excited about the next episode. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see y'all later. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.